funny, I kind of fell into percussion by accident, and it was something I was interested in only from talking with friends wanting to form a band, and everyone else already played guitar or bass guitar or wanted to sing or whatever. So all that was left was the drums. But even at that point, it was still just talk. Like none of us actually owned drums or anything like that. And it was in grade 5 or grade 6. I think it was grade 5. I was just sitting in class, and a friend of mine came into class, and she was talking to her girlfriends and said, oh, she had just quit the school band, and she was the drummer of the school band. And for some reason, I just perked up, and I turned around, and I said, oh, does that mean the band's looking for a drummer? And she's like, yeah, I guess so. And I ran right down to the band room. And I found the band director, who I'd never even met before, and I said, I want to play drums. I started studying with Paul Houle at the conservatory. The year escapes me, but it was somewhere in the late 90s. Paul showed me an incredible just array of instruments that I'd never seen before, like world instruments, a marimba. He also ran the percussion ensemble at the conservatory, which I got involved in. And so at a very young age, I was playing percussion ensemble music, which I didn't realize would be such a huge part of my life about 20 years later, which is basically my career is mostly chamber music, if not just percussion ensemble. Through Paul, he set up lessons for me with Bob Becker. Ray Dillard actually would fill in for him sometimes when Paul was getting really busy with his company. So I actually had lessons with Ray when I was 16 or 17 for the first time. I went to the Etobicoke School of the Arts in Toronto, and Paul Ormandy, who was a big guy on the scene, playing Lion King, playing other shows in town, he was the visiting artist. And Andy Morris, who's another percussionist in town, who's was teaching at a camp that I went to that was run by the school board every year. So at a very young age, I was getting the best instruction in Toronto from a variety of sources. And I remember all those instances really clearly. So thinking back on it now, I think maybe I saw something important to me in all these instruments, just learning about African music at a very young age, learning about percussion ensemble, learning mallet techniques, all those things. And so to make a long story even longer, I guess, from your question of what excites me about percussion is, and still continues to excite me, is that all the possibilities. My father was a musician in the Toronto Symphony. He was an oboe player, second oboe, for 40 years. And he's now happily retired. I think about 4 years retired now. Going to the Toronto Symphony was a regular occurrence, not even just for concerts, but mostly actually for rehearsals, daytime things. It was more like a daycare for me. I remember I used to go a lot if I was sick and I had to stay home from school, or there just wasn't anybody to take care of me. I would go to the symphony, and I would either sit in the seats and listen or crawl around the seats, or I'd just be backstage, hanging out in the green room or drawing or wandering around aimlessly. My dad would take me around to meet all the different people, and at a very young age I was conversing with adults a lot. So that was sort of my upbringing, was spending a lot of time with people older than me, and he would take me in. I remember taking me backstage and meeting the percussionists and like hitting some stuff back there or seeing what they would do, and so it was always very interesting. I guess this sounds kind of weird. I don't enjoy listening to myself play or listening to what I have done. I'm very picky, and I'm a little hard to please for myself. I'm my own worst critic. When I'm actually involved in something, my brain gets going. So much so that like when I'm taking a break from it and I'm trying to sleep, I'm still thinking about it. Yeah, and that happens. It happens a bit. Like my brain's always loud, as I mentioned, whether I'm just talking to myself or just thoughts, like constantly. I prefer live performance because it's just there and it's gone. I don't have to listen back to it. You know, I know that what I've done is in the moment, and mistakes happen and they're forgotten. Mistakes happen on a recording, and you have to listen back and try to choose places that weren't a mistake, but you just keep on hearing this mistake over and over and over again. You're like, well, it's there. It's stuck. It's a great outlet for us. We're kind of at a new, Nexus came in and brought like this one wave of percussion to Canada, and they taught people about instruments, and people from that generation are now kind of few and far between, and now we're in like a new surge of people rediscovering percussion. I think we caught that wave at a great point. When you get repertoire to a point where you're just breathing it, that's a whole other level of how you can perform. You can, especially when everyone's on the same page, you can take tempos that you never took before and everyone's on board, or you're taking a different tempo and you're taking everyone for a ride and they have no idea. I'm a little unpredictable with tempos. Sometimes I like playing things really fast. Sometimes I'll switch it up and take something I'll usually play fast and play it even faster, sometimes slower. Now that I'm starting to write a lot more music myself, like that's another whole other level of what excites me about percussion, is the possibilities of what can still come out of, using desk bells or using cut pieces of wood or using, finding more sound sources, like kind of like what's the next step. It's kind of it's an interesting time for percussion right now, I think. I'm an improviser. I have, well, even when you're improvising, you have plans. They're just all around you, and you just like, okay, this one now. Okay, now this one. So I have ideas. I have lots of ideas, goals, ambitions, uh, fears, things that, you know, and they're all over the place all the time. Sometimes some of those things end up in a calendar. That's the date that we'll do this thing. Sometimes it's just an idea, and then it's like, hey, why don't we do that thing we talked about tomorrow? Yeah, I think I very much. I often say that my life would probably be a lot easier if it was more regimented. For me, for my own personality, it probably would be if everything was just like lined out, like this. But that's not me.